Tonight, breaking news as the country awaits the verdict in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. The defense has rested in the trial for the killing of Ahmaud Arbery. The bombshell testimony today, the man who fired the shots that killed Arbery, admitting during cross-examination that he was not under any threat before he and two other men followed Arbery through a Georgia neighborhood and killed him. Also tonight, we're live in Kenosha, where jury deliberations in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial have wrapped up for a third day. The city preparing for any outcome, with at least 5 schools now closed due to the pending verdict. And live on Top Story, I speak to the lawyer for 2 of the victims, including the only survivor, how he's now feeling about where the case stands. Also breaking tonight, Oklahoma's governor commuting the death sentence of Julius Jones just hours before his execution. His case gaining national attention and sparking days of protest, but the victim's family says there's overwhelming evidence that he is guilty. Plus the video showing the moment Pennsylvania police shot a teenager who had his hands up while holding a pellet gun. The calls for an independent investigation tonight after authorities obscured his final moments in publicly released footage. The manhunt tonight for a former NFL player after disturbing video showed him beating his ex-girlfriend in front of their 5-month-old son. And long-delayed justice, a New York judge exonerating 2 men who served decades in prison for the assassination of Malcolm X. Only one alive to see the day. His message from the courtroom. Top Story starts right now. And good evening, I'm Tom Llamas, and we are live in Kenosha again tonight for a special edition of Top Story. Jury deliberations for the Kyle Rittenhouse trial have now entered and finalized for their third day as the city and the country await a verdict. But we begin tonight with breaking news in the trial for the killing of Ahmaud Arbery. The defense has rested and jury deliberations will begin on Monday. The stunning moment in court today when Travis McMichael, the man who fired the fatal shots, took the stand again for cross-examination, testifying that Arbery did not threaten him or brandish any weapon before the deadly encounter. McMichael, his father, and another defendant, who are all white, are accused of chasing the 25-year-old black man as he jogged through a Georgia neighborhood before fatally shooting him with a shotgun. They claim they thought Arbery was behind a string of burglaries. Now, outside the courthouse, over 100 pastors from around the country alongside the Reverend Al Sharpton. This after one of the defense attorneys said he didn't want, quote, any more black pastors in court. Our Ron Allen has been following this case since the beginning, and he leads us off tonight from Georgia.
Yeah, he did not threaten me verbally, no ma'am.
All right. Didn't brandish any weapons?
No ma'am.
Didn't pull out any guns?
No ma'am.
In the final day of testimony, prosecutors spent hours challenging Travis McMichael's claim that Ahmaud Arbery attacked him and that he shot and killed Arbery in self-defense back in February of last year.
Didn't pull out any knife?
No ma'am.
Never reached for anything, did he?
No.
He just ran?
Yes, he was just running.
McMichael insisting he and his co-defendants had been trying to detain Arbery until police could arrive, suspecting he had been involved in an uptick in crime in a neighborhood on edge. At one point, he accused Arbery of attacking the pickup truck driven by defendant William Bryan. McMichael testifying he feared Arbery would come at him and his father, Greg McMichael, next.
He was acting weird. He was acting funny when I was trying to talk to him prior, so I'm on alert.
The prosecution pushed back.
So you're telling this jury that a man who has spent 5 minutes running away from you, you're now thinking is somehow going to want to continue to engage with you, someone with a shotgun, and your father, a man who's just said, stop or I'll blow your head off, by trying to get in their truck?
That's what it shows, yes ma'am.
Outside the courtroom, hundreds gathered to support Arbery's family, including numerous black pastors.
I'm thankful for this family who has
In response to a defense attorney's request to restrict the number of ministers Arbery's family can invite to court, singling out 2 men again this morning.
The court is authorized to exclude Reverend Sharpton and Reverend Jackson from the courtroom without a hearing.
The judge again refused the request, to the relief of Arbery's family.
I just want to say thank you to all the pastors who traveled near and far to come and just to be with us in this very, very difficult time.
All right, Ron Allen joins us now from outside the courthouse. And Ron, quite the day today at that trial. The defense has rested their case. How is Arbery's family feeling right now?
They seem exhausted. You just heard Arbery's mother say it's been a very difficult time. She said that they're not where they want to be yet either, but she's very confident. She said that they will get the right verdict. She reminded everyone that, this has been almost 2 years. Arbery was killed in February of 2020, and for many months, nothing happened with this. No one was arrested for many, many months until finally this happened. And several prosecutors have handled this case. We're up to, I think, the 4th or 15 now. And the one local prosecutor is even facing charges for obstruction of justice. So the family also was very, very grateful to the outpouring of support from the pastors and other activists who came here today and from around the country. Remember, this case has been part of has led and contributed to the racial reckoning that America has been going through for the past year or so. And a lot of people see the outcome of this as a test of just how far the country has come. Tom?
All right, Ron Allen leading us off tonight here on Top Story. Ron, thank you. For more analysis on this trial, Paul Henderson joins us now. He's a veteran prosecutor and trial attorney. And so I want to start with what happened today in court and what we saw. Prosecutors had the chance to cross-examine Travis McMichael today. How do you think they did?
I think they did a very good job. I think what they did was effectively counter the defense strategy. One of the things that the defense had done here was to try and tell the prosecution that they had 30 witnesses that they had planned on calling. And so they tried to catch the prosecution flat-footed by closing their case so suddenly. And what we saw when they put their client on the stand, Travis was on the stand, the defendant, and, he was ripped apart. He was ripped apart in the cross-examination. They did a really good job of exposing some really fundamentals for self-defense that were taken apart, being that he was not threatened, either physically nor verbally, nor any of them were. And that's important because the foundation for self-defense, which is an affirmative defense, you must prove as a defendant that you had a reasonable fear and a justifiable use of force. And that's just not here in a case like this. And once again, we've all seen the video, so we know what happened. It's just hearing the present sense impressions and whether or not that shifted the needle or shifted the perception about what was going on or our perceptions of the case.
That kind of leads to the next question, which is, why do you think the defense wrapped up so quickly? It almost felt like they ended sort of abruptly.
Yeah, two reasons. One, they thought that they had put in the best case that they could with the witness that they had, and they didn't want to put the other defendants on the stand, in part, I believe, because they didn't want the adoptive admissions and the negative things that they would have said. And they purposefully and specifically chose Travis to put on the stand, I believe, because they thought that he had the most credibility of linking his behavior and his incorrect assumptions to law enforcement. That's why we saw so much focus from his testimony on what his law enforcement training was in the Coast Guard, all of the terminology, all of the training that he had associated with law enforcement, in an effort to try and conflate his behavior to excusable behavior if it was associated with law enforcement training, rather than miscalculated, incorrect, and racist behavior that led to the lynching and the killing that we have here on trial. And so that's a big part of why they led with him. And then the second part of that is, I believe, to just try and catch prosecution unaware or unready for what they could be bringing. And in this case, they just didn't have very much to bring anyway. And if there's any doubt as to whether or not that's true, you can listen to the motions that have been made all throughout the trial from the lawyers that had everything to do with anything but the facts in this case. That's why you had the conversation and the motions about what was happening outside of the courtroom, what was happening with the preachers, with the in limine motions about Ahmaud Arbery and his mental health and or his probation status that has nothing to do with the facts.
Okay, Paul, we thank you for that analysis. Thank you for all of that. We want to turn now to the other major trial today, a jury meeting for the third straight day to decide the fate of 18-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse. The city of Kenosha anxiously awaiting a verdict. NBC national correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has been covering the trial for us from right here in Kenosha. He joins us now live from another side of the courthouse. Gabe, the jury was pretty quiet today. Where do things stand right now?
Yeah, that's right, Tom. They're at about 23 hours of deliberation right now. Just a short time ago, the judge actually sent them home for the night, and one of the jurors actually asked the judge if she could take a copy of the jury instructions home with her. Not quite sure what that means, but the judge said that she could do so. Also, we got some notes from a pool reporter inside the courtroom, and the pool reporter said that Mark Richards, the defense attorney for Kyle Rittenhouse, had actually walked in earlier this afternoon, not because he was summoned, but because he was, quote, stressed and bored. He had no indication of where the jury could be at this point. And Tom, the growing speculation is here, could potentially we be heading perhaps to a hung jury? We really have no indication right now of which way the jury is leaning at this point, Tom.
Yeah, Gabe, as we both cover this trial, it's interesting. The only people that really know what's going on with the jury are the jurors themselves. Talk to us about the atmosphere here in the city, because we saw some developments today. I was able to speak with the sheriff over here. He was handing out cookies for peace, as he called them. The temperature outside seems to be a little more calm than yesterday, but they clearly are watching any developments and waiting for that verdict.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Tom. And you saw some of the arrests that happened here yesterday. There was a police presence at time here today, but largely peaceful crowd. The one thing I can say, Tom, several schools in the area have actually switched to virtual learning in anticipation of any possible verdict. And as we've been reporting, Tom, several hundred National Guard members are on standby, but not deployed here yet, just in case things get out of hand. But the overwhelming sentiment, at least from what I can tell in the community, is yes, it is calm, but there is this anticipation, and perhaps many people are wondering what could be taking so long. Another high-profile trial here in Kenosha took about 31 hours of deliberation before a verdict was returned. Again, we're now at 23 hours from this jury. Third day of deliberations. The jurors are expected back here at this courthouse tomorrow morning, Tom.
All right, Gabe, we thank you for that. And joining us now is Kimberly Motley. She's an attorney for Gage Grosskreutz, the man who survived being shot by Kyle Rittenhouse, along with the estate of Joseph Rosenbaum, one of the men killed by Rittenhouse. She's also an MSNBC legal analyst. So, Kimberly, my first question to you is, how are the families doing right now, and how do you and they interpret the jury taking so long?
Well, thank you for having me. The families are doing as best as they can under these circumstances. The holidays are coming up, particularly for Joseph Rosenbaum's family, as well as Anthony Humer's family, whom I don't represent. So it's a particularly hard time because Thanksgiving is obviously right around the corner. But they're all being patient and just waiting to see what the jurors' verdict is going to be.
Your client was described by the prosecution, as I look at my notes here, as irrational and crazy. How tough has this trial been for the families?
I mean, it's been extremely taxing. It's, my client, I think, Gage, he came here and bravely testified. It's been a lot that this last year has held for him. There's been a lot of death threats to him and his family. People that so-called are, Rittenhouse fans that have been pretty much attacking or trying to attack everyone else, character-wise, or, showing up at people's employment, their houses, and things like that. So, I think it's very brave for him to testify. And he was a hero on August 25th. He came out here to try to provide medical services to different people that were out here protesting on behalf of Jacob Blake, and as well as counter-protesters.
Gage was at the center of one of the turning points in this trial. A lot of legal analysts said that his testimony on the stand, where he said that essentially he was pointing a gun at Kyle Rittenhouse, was a turning point, because then that plays to the self-defense argument that the Rittenhouse attorneys have been trying for. What was that day like for you and for Gage?
Well, I'll say this. The thing that's interesting, I was really pleased that the prosecutors brought it around in the closing statements, that basically, yes, he pointed his gun after his arm was nearly shot off by the defendant. So sure, if you want to count that as pointing his weapon, he didn't have use of his arm. He couldn't even bring up his arm even if he wanted to, because Rittenhouse shot the muscle out of it. So I think that I was very proud of him for coming here. He told the truth of what happened. And frankly, he tried to do what he can to stop an active shooter.
Finally, the legal journey for these families doesn't end with this verdict, correct?
That's correct.
Talk to me about that.
Well, we filed a civil lawsuit on behalf of Gage Grosskreutz, and we're looking to file a civil lawsuit on behalf of the estate of Joseph Rosenbaum. So this case is going to continue to live on, at least in the civil court. It may, frankly, live on in the criminal courts, depending on what the decision of the jurors is.
And as a lawyer, what is your sort of sixth sense, if you will? What do you think is going to happen once the verdict comes?
Well, I mean, I'm really, we're all sitting here, waiting. You guys are out in the cold waiting. And, I don't know. Obviously that, they're taking this seriously. They're looking at a lot of evidence, a lot of exhibits. And, we're going into day 4 of deliberation. So we'll see. Okay, Kimberly Motley, thank you so much for your time. I know it's very cold out here, so we appreciate your time. Thank you for having me. All right, we take you now to Oklahoma, where the governor called off the execution of a man convicted of first-degree murder mere hours before he was set to die by lethal injection. But the victim's family insists that he is guilty. Here's NBC's Miguel Almaguer.
Celebrations across Oklahoma erupted as news of the 11th hour clemency spread. From the Capitol to college campuses, relief after the governor's decision narrowly spared the life of death row inmate Julius Jones. After prayerful consideration, writes the governor, I have determined to commute Julius Jones' sentence to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole.
He's an innocent man, doesn't deserve another day in prison, but to know that he's going to live, where there's life, there's always hope.
With Jones just hours away from lethal injection, he always maintained his innocence in the 1999 carjacking that ended with Paul Howell being gunned down in front of his family.
I was not involved in the planning of this robbery. I was not present during this robbery.
Convincing a pardon and parole board to grant him clemency, Jones' legal team says his friend who testified against him, Christopher Jordan, was likely the real killer and the man who planted the murder weapon inside Jones' home, which Jordan denies.
People could see very clearly that the trial was a sham and that this is not what they want justice to look like in America. And Julius himself is a compelling character, a promising young man who was arrested for a crime he didn't commit at 19 years old.
Amid a wave of grassroots protests, walkouts, and rallies, celebrities, athletes, and politicians showed their support, along with 7 million who signed a petition to prevent Jones' execution. But it's not only the prosecution who says there's overwhelming evidence Jones is guilty. So does the victim's family.
I am here to warn you. He is not innocent. Would you have this man over to your house with your family around your children?
Tonight, 22 years after a life was lost, another was narrowly spared. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News.
We thank Miguel for that story. And a major development tonight in the fight against COVID-19. The FDA likely to decide by tomorrow that all U.S. adults can get a booster shot. This after months of debate and confusion over who should be eligible. NBC's Kate Snow takes a closer look.
With winter looming and COVID cases rising, sources tell NBC News the FDA is likely to authorize both Pfizer and Moderna boosters for all adults by tomorrow. The CDC expected to follow suit. The change potentially creating more confusion. It was August when President Biden first promised boosters for every adult.
It will be easy. Just show your vaccination card and you'll get a booster.
But in September, an FDA panel concluded boosters were only necessary for those over 65. The governor of Connecticut mocking the process today.
CDC speaks Latin. I can't figure out who's eligible, who's not eligible. If you smoked while you were in high school back in the 1970s, you're eligible. I think if you haven't been vaccinated or in more than 6 months, now's the time to get the booster.
Connecticut, more than one of a dozen states, plus New York and Chicago, that took action on their own, putting pressure on the FDA.
The FDA initially did not approve boosters for all adults. Now they are. What's the change?
Pfizer submitted data on 10,000 patients, half of whom received a booster and the other half that didn't. People that received a booster returned to their post-dose 2 effectiveness levels, which is incredible.
Would you urge all adults right now to go try to get a booster before the holidays?
I would, if they've been 6 months out from their second dose.
So what will now constitute being fully vaccinated? The CDC still isn't counting boosters, but at least 2 governors are already saying residents must have a booster to be considered fully protected.
And I expect that in several months, it will become part of the requirement to be considered fully immunized.
All right, Kate Snow joins us now live on Top Story. So, Kate, assuming the FDA does approve this, When can people start making appointments, and are there any concerns about availability of boosters, because we have seen so many hiccups along this entire process?
Yeah, I asked that question to Dr. Patel. She says, look, there's tons of supply out there right now, Tom. It's already in doctors' offices. It's already in pharmacies. I think the issue, the bottleneck is going to be those appointments, right? Because as soon as the FDA says this, which we think will be by tomorrow, everybody's going to try to book an appointment. In many states, you can't book that appointment right now because you're not eligible. Once you are, we're going to have millions and millions of adult Americans trying to get it at the same time before the holidays.
All right, Kate Snow for us here on Top Story. Kate, always great to have you. Now to the troubling mystery over that missing Chinese tennis player. You may have heard about this story. The 35-year-old has not been seen in more than 2 weeks after she accused a top Chinese official of sexual assault. The questionable statement tonight from China as some of the world's top tennis players demand answers. NBC News' Janice Mackey-Frayer has that story.
Tonight, growing concern for Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai. The former world #1 doubles champion disappeared from public view after accusing an ex-vice premier of China of sexual assault. Chinese state media claiming that Peng is fine, showing what it said was an email she sent to the Women's Tennis Association recanting the allegations. The head of the WTA doubts that Peng actually wrote it.
We definitely want to speak to her directly and make sure that she's okay.
Outrage spreading across the tennis world. Serena Williams, Naomi Osaka, and more rallying around the hashtag, Where is Peng Shuai?
It's shocking, that she's missing.
Peng's allegations appeared on her social media account November 2nd, revealing an alleged and largely consensual affair with Zheng Gaolin, and included a claim that he forced her into sex. Zheng retired in 2018 and can't be reached for comment. Peng's presence has been all but erased from China's internet.
When you search for her account, there's nothing there.
The WTA demanding an investigation and threatening to pull its tour from China.
This cannot be swept under the rug. It can't be condoned.
With Beijing hosting the Winter Olympics, pressure is now mounting here to break the silence and to find Peng Shuai.
All right, Janice joins us now live from Beijing. So, Janice, the World Tennis Association has called for an investigation, but do they have any leverage, any power to successfully pressure China, a world superpower?
Well, the Women's Tennis Association has 11 tournaments and a long-term deal, which is lucrative, over $1 billion, to have the tour finals here. Yet they're talking openly about a boycott of China. If there isn't an investigation of Peng Shuai's claims and this censorship that has all but scrubbed her from the internet here. Look, companies and sports organizations know there are a lot of tripwires in China. The NBA is a good example, knowing that challenging China can carry consequences. But on this, the WTA seems firm. This is a claim of assault made by one of its players. And they say if there isn't transparency, they may be willing to consider walking away from China.
So, Janice, today there was a major headline coming out of the White House. Basically, President Biden saying he is considering supporting a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Winter Olympics, which are just 78 days away. Do you feel like this is going to push China one way or the other?
Well, officially, it's just hard to tell here, Tom. Everything is silent. The Chinese Tennis Association won't comment. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs won't address Peng or the allegations. They're telling us it's not a diplomatic question. And Zheng has retired, so he can't be reached for comment. And Peng has all but disappeared. These allegations are, for the first time, reaching at one of the pinnacles of political power here. So this is unprecedented, and the stakes are high. That said, Beijing is adamant that it's going to have what it calls a splendid Winter Olympics, that the Games will go ahead. But it is worth noting that earlier this week, when President Xi Jinping was meeting with President Biden in that virtual meeting, he didn't extend an invitation to President Biden to attend the Winter Olympics, and that was expected.
All right, Janice, we thank you for all that reporting, and I know you'll stay on top of this story. We turn now back here in the States to the fatal shooting of a teenager in Pennsylvania. Authorities releasing new video showing state troopers shooting at 19-year-old Christian Hall, who was holding a pellet gun. Hall's family talking exclusively to NBC News, saying he had his hands up. We do want to warn you this story does contain graphic content. Vaughn Hilliard reports.
Tonight, new video released showing Pennsylvania State Police fatally shooting a Chinese-American teenager who had his hands in the air holding a pellet gun when troopers opened fire. The videos recorded by the state police on December 30th, 2020, shows Christian Hall, who had been diagnosed with depression, standing on a ledge of a highway overpass in northeastern Pennsylvania when troopers arrived.
Can you step down and talk to us? You're not in any trouble. You're not in any trouble.
In the video, the troopers back away after seeing what they believed to be a gun in Hall's hands. It was later determined to be a realistic pellet gun. Authorities are then seen attempting to persuade Hall to step off the ledge, with Hall repeatedly ignoring their request to drop the gun for about 90 minutes. Troopers firing warning shots at the concrete barrier next to Hall.
Put it down.
The original video, released by the Monroe County District Attorney, blurs the final seconds of the encounter, obscuring Hall raising his hands in the air with the gun in one hand. The state police's initial press release said Hall pointed the gun at officers before they fired. But the new video, obtained by Spotlight PA and NBC News via the Hall family lawyer's subpoena, shows Hall kept his hands above his head for 14 seconds in all, including when the two troopers fired at him.
He called 911. He was looking for help. You don't call 911 and expect that you'd be shot. You call 911 for help. He knows that. And yet he ended up dead.
The Monroe County District Attorney's Office ruled the shooting justified in March 2021, saying the lives of the troopers on scene were in danger.
It was a classic suicide by cop scenario. Mr. Hall would not be deterred.
The Pennsylvania State Police and the District Attorney's Office declined NBC News' request for interviews.
It's really a matter of do you believe the police were justified in shooting him simply because he had what they believed to be a gun, even though his hands were in the air?
The family hopeful the district attorney will ultimately hand the case over to the state's attorney general to determine whether the use of force was warranted.
It's simply inexplicable how you can fire several rounds at an individual who is standing in the universal stance of surrender.
Hall's mother, emotional, remembering her son.
I want to remember him the way I remember him, full of life. No one should be shot at like that. Like his life was not valuable. Like that was not a life. Like bullets will not take a life.
Vaughn Hilliard joins us now from New York. And Vaughn, since this reporting, have we heard any more from the police?
Tom, this is tough, and the state police have declined NBC News' request for further interviews at this time. But clearly from this video, this is a tough situation here. The police have said that they believe that he was carrying a semi-automatic pistol. He came within 70 feet of them. And of course, you hear from that mother there. Ultimately, they see in that video their son, who is in a mental health crisis there, with his hands up in the air, and of course don't believe that his death was justified and that their son should still be alive. Tom?
All right, Vaughn, thank you for that. And you can see more of this story and the interview with Christian Hall's parents tomorrow on Hallie Jackson Now. That's tomorrow evening. All right, now to the major storm set to slow down holiday travel on both coasts during the busiest travel week of the year. Al Roker joins us now on Top Story. So, Al, what can travelers expect next week, and when is the worst expected to hit?
So, Tom, out west, I think we'll start with that first. We're basically looking at this storm coming in. Right now, it's starting to weaken, so we think for the early part of next week, this is going to be a rainmaker, but nothing too severe. But here in the northeast and mid-Atlantic, this storm will be developing Sunday across the Great Lakes. The front will head east Sunday night, pushing its way Monday. Now, back behind this, we're going to start to get strong winds coming across the Great Lakes, lake effect snow with strong winds Monday into Tuesday as the system pulls away, intensifies, drawing more winds across the lake, heavy lake effect snow from Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Williamsport. We're going to be looking at scattered snow showers possibly into the northeast. These strong winds from the Midwest into the Atlantic, areas of heavy lake effect snow. This time is going to be the coldest air and wind chills of the season. And for travel, going to be a big problem for Boston, not from the rain so much as the wind. Same for New York, Washington, D.C., Cleveland. You're going to see snow and wind, Cincinnati, gusty winds, Chicago, gusty winds, all these hubs, Tom, that are going to be taking a bit of a beating. But we think by Wednesday, things will be back to normal. And by Thursday, for those travelers on Turkey Day, no big problems. Tom?
And of course, a lot of top story viewers are going to want to know, is there any type of weather that will keep you from the Thanksgiving Day parade?
No, Tom, they're already tying me down. I've got lots of ropes on me, and I got about 12 or 13 guys that'll be pulling me down Broadway. It's going to be fantastic.
All right, we will look forward to that. Al, thank you.
Okay.
Still ahead tonight, the sentencing outrage. The man pleading guilty to rape but getting no jail time. What the judge said that shocked the courtroom while some of the victims were there. And the recall alert we need to tell you about. Toyota warning hundreds of thousands of Camrys may have brake issues, what customers need to know. And the manhunt tonight for the former NFL player after a horrific video showed him brutally attacking his ex-girlfriend in front of their infant son. Stay with us. Back now with a graphic attack caught on camera of former NFL player beating his ex-girlfriend in a Florida home, their 5-month-old child just feet away. Maura Barrett has this story from Chicago tonight, and we do want to warn you, the video we're about to show you is disturbing.
Tonight, police looking to arrest a former NFL player after these horrifying images surfaced, showing him beating his ex-girlfriend.
Listen. You think that was okay?
Kristen Evans speaking out in an interview with NBC's Telemundo.
Please.
But this has been one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do in my life. Well, I just wanted to make sure that I stayed conscious, that I was afraid that, he was in a rage.
Former NFL running back Zac Stacy visited her and their 5-month-old baby in Florida this weekend. Seen in this home surveillance video posted on her social media. Stacy is seen suddenly slapping and then punching her in the head before picking her up and throwing her at the TV across the room. Their baby close by, Stacy throws her to the ground again before leaving the home.
God, please.
I love you, Coach. It's been several times. At least 3. Those are the 3 that I have documented. Because I felt like I was falling through the cracks of the legal system in Florida. I feel like they don't take domestic violence as seriously as they should. No one should have to live in fear of their life.
The Oakland Police Department told NBC News they responded quickly, but found Stacy had fled the state. Efforts are underway to capture Stacy, and we would urge him to turn himself in and face the criminal charges. Evans says she has since filed a restraining order. Situations like this are dangerously common in the NFL world. An analysis by 538 found domestic violence accounts for 48% of arrests among NFL players. That's compared to 21% nationally. What's not as common, for survivors to have video evidence of the abuse.
What happens when video like this doesn't exist?
We're a society that does not believe adult victims in general, right? Unless we've seen it with our own eyes. Though we wouldn't wish this on anyone, when we see the video, we are able to say, this is what it looks like.
Maura joins us now live from Chicago. That woman, Kristen Evans, so brave to come out and do that interview and talk about what happened to her. It was truly horrific. You mentioned police are still searching for Stacy. Do they have any leads?
Well, Tom, he fled the state of Florida and is believed to be in Nashville. We reached out to his team but haven't heard back. His reputation already taking a hit, though, a former teammate criticizing him on Twitter, while other NFL players are calling what he did cowardly. And while it is rare to see this graphic violence on camera like this in terms of domestic abuse, the National Coalition Against Domestic Abuse tells me that incidents like this, abuse like this, happens every minute in the U.S. alone, be it physical or verbal. So what Kristen Evans is doing here, speaking out, bringing awareness, they say is incredibly important to keep the conversation going. Tom.
Every minute. That is so wild. All right, Maura, thank you so much for that. When we come back, devastating discovery. What authorities just announced after a days-long search for 2 young girls abducted by their father and his former police colleague. And long-delayed justice, 2 men convicted in Malcolm X's assassination now exonerated, only one of them still alive. His strong message to the court. Back now to Top Stories news feed, and we begin with the tragic discovery in the search for 2 children who were abducted by their father in Pennsylvania. Police say both girls, ages 6 and 7, were found dead along with their father and another woman in Maryland. Both adults are both former Baltimore police officers. Authorities say the man took his 2 daughters after assaulting their mother on Monday and then went on a days-long crime spree. 2 men who served decades in prison for the assassination of Malcolm X had their names cleared today. A judge exonerating Mohammed Aziz and Khalil Islam for the 1965 killing. Aziz, who was 83 years old, was in court today saying he was, quote, victimized by the criminal justice system. Both men always maintained their innocence, but Islam died in 2009. The Manhattan District Attorney and judge both apologizing for the long-delayed justice. And a consumer alert tonight here on Top Story. Toyota is recalling nearly 240,000 Camrys over brake issues. The recall covers certain sedans from the 2018 and 2019 years. The company says they can suddenly lose the power assist in the brake system. Owners with affected vehicles will be notified by mid-January. And a millionaire dog, yeah, you heard this right, a millionaire dog is putting his Miami mansion up for sale. Gunther, the German Shepherd, is listing the former home of Madonna for $31.8 million. The villa was purchased for the dog's grandfather after he inherited a vast fortune from his former owner. The dogs have lived in the 8-bedroom waterfront villa with their handlers and full staff. One of Gunther's caretakers manages the multi-million-dollar trust. All right, back now to the Rittenhouse trial. A community still on edge here and awaiting a verdict after 3 full days of jury deliberations. Tom Grieve joins us again tonight. You may remember him from yesterday's broadcast. He's a former state prosecutor and a current defense attorney. So, Tom, we came out here to Kenosha because we thought there was going to be a verdict. We're obviously waiting a little longer. We're at 23 hours by my count. What does that tell you, if anything, about the jury?
Well, look, the chances for an acquittal from a self-defense verdict, they're down, but they're not out. But the prevailing wisdom is clear. The longer this jury goes, it's probably less of an issue of whether or not they're going to be letting him off from a not guilty due to self-defense and more of a what are we going to wind up convicting him of. But keep in mind, juries are strange things. They might be deciding any number of different things as they're looking at all the different lesser included charges.
So we know the jury instructions is about 37 pages long, and one of the jurors today, before they ended, asked the judge if she could take the jury instructions home, I guess to review it, to look it over. Is that normal, and what will she get from those jury instructions?
It's reasonably unconventional. It's not something that at least I'm accustomed to seeing in my practice. They're very, very technical documents. If you spend some time looking at them, they're very wordy. Actually, the defense objected to the jury taking them home. Keep in mind as well that this is a jury, meaning that all 12 jurors have to be unanimous. This isn't an 11-1 or a 10-2 or anything like that. If they don't reach a unanimous outcome, we're looking at a hung jury, which could lead to a mistrial.
So we're heading into Friday tomorrow. After that, the holiday week. Is that weighing on the minds of jurors? Do you think inside that jury room they're saying, listen, clock is ticking, we need to come up with a verdict, or do you think they're just trying to make the right decision?
I think right now they're trying to make the right decision. And what spoke to me about today was not so much what was said, but what was not said. Specifically,
no questions.
No questions, but also no dreaded letter coming from the jury to the judge of, you know what, we're deadlocked. We haven't gotten to that stage yet, which suggested very strongly to me that no hearts and minds have been hardened yet.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you one final question here. If you were the attorneys for Kyle Rittenhouse, because we heard a little bit from them just from the pool notes inside the courtroom there, they said they were going kind of insinuating that they were just going a little stir crazy, if you will. What do you think they're telling Kyle right now? I mean, because Kyle's got to be nervous.
They're probably counseling him. They're keeping him calm. They're reminding him that anything can happen at any point in time. But in their hearts, they know that this is not looking good and we're moving in the wrong direction for the defense.
All right, Tom Grieve for us. We really thank you for your legal analysis. It's cold out here, so we appreciate you waiting for us. All right, we want to turn now to another court case making big headlines. A New York judge handing down a controversial sentence, giving a 20-year-old just 8 years probation after he pleaded guilty to rape and sexual assault several of his victims in court for the hearing. One of them so distraught, her lawyer says she threw up after hearing the judge's decision. NBC News correspondent Rahima Ellis reports.
Tonight, outrage and disbelief over the decision to let a man charged with rape off without serving a single day in prison.
There was great pain. There was great harm. There were multiple crimes committed in the case.
Niagara County Judge Matthew Murphy defending his decision to sentence 20-year-old Christopher Belcher, who was facing up to 8 years in prison, to just 8 years probation.
I agonized. I'm not ashamed to say that I actually prayed over what is the appropriate sentence in this case.
Belcher pleaded guilty to third-degree rape and sexual abuse for assaulting 4 girls at his home over the course of 3 years when he was a student at an elite private boarding school.
Through treatment and reflection, I've come to feel deep shame and regret for my actions. None of you deserve to be in this situation.
Some of Belcher's victims there in the New York courtroom for the sentencing in tears, according to others present. A lawyer for one victim telling NBC News his client threw up in the court bathroom after the sentence, adding that the sentence seems to perpetuate the insane belief that rape is not a serious crime and that its occurrence results in little consequence to the perpetrator. Our society needs to do much better. The judge had previously denied Belcher youthful offender status, meaning he was sentenced as an adult after he violated the terms of his interim probation by downloading software on his computer that allowed him to watch pornography, according to the Buffalo News and the victim's lawyer.
He's made it clear to the court and to everybody that he has no intention of following the rules of probation because he's already broken them once. And my guess would be he's back in court. If he had been a young black man in Brooklyn, he'd be in jail.
Judge Murphy, who was first elected to the bench in 2007, turned 70 next month, the mandatory retirement age for judges in New York State.
The members of the bar in that area should get together and should pressure him to retire sooner. Not only the prosecutor's office should be doing that, women's groups should be doing that. This person is not fit to be on the bench.
Belcher will remain on probation until he is 28 years old and must register as a sex offender. His attorneys did not respond to requests for comment. Rahima Ellis, NBC News.
All right, we thank Rahima for that story. Now to top stories global watch and the deadly storm slamming southern Italy. New video shows at least 2 tornadoes touching down in Sicily. Roofs blown off businesses, at least 1 person killed. Heavy rain also causing mud and water to flood the streets. More than 300 people so far have been rescued. And Russia says it has tested a hypersonic cruise missile against a target in the White Sea. The reported test coming amid mounting tension between Moscow and the U.S. and its allies. Last week, Britain's top military general warned there's a greater risk of war between Russia and the West than at any other time since the Cold War. And Afghanistan's junior women's soccer team has fled from the Taliban with a little help from Kim Kardashian. The reality star paid for a flight that brought more than 30 teenage girls and their families to the UK. The group of 130 have been on the run since August. Some of the athletes and their families had already received death threats. A Jewish organization and British soccer team, Leeds United, also helped with that rescue. All right, coming up tonight, the nursing home horror. The facility under a state investigation after multiple disturbing discoveries, but NBC News has learned they're still operating with the same owners, just under new names. The chilling details next. And we're back now with an NBC investigation into the disturbing details coming out of a nursing home in New Jersey. After COVID took the lives of so many there, staff packed the bodies into a tiny morgue until there was no room, and then someone allegedly left a body in the backyard. NBC's Stephanie Goss spoke to the worker who made the chilling discovery.
At the start of the pandemic, nursing homes were hit first, and they were hit hard. What allegedly happened at Andover Subacute in New Jersey was especially shocking.
What was it like when people started dying?
Horrific. There was no word for it. You know, we were losing sometimes between 10 and 12 people a night.
Preston Nikolai was 20 in April of last year, a maintenance worker in the facility. This is the first time he's spoken publicly about what he saw.
Easter Sunday of 2020, there was 17, 18 people in the morgue stacked up.
You had to put bodies on top of each other just to get them in that room?
Yeah.
And you are physically moving them yourself?
Yeah.
And then a grim discovery. In the shed outside, among the gardening tools and the lawnmower, he says someone had put a body.
Someone had put a body in the backyard?
Yeah.
Why?
There was no room.
Nikolai said he was so disturbed, he moved the body back inside.
You know, to most people, COVID was just something to fear and hopefully not get.
At the time, Dante Molioli's father was a resident at Andover.
Say hi, Dante.
Hi, Dante.
Before COVID, his family was looking for another nursing home.
Did your dad complain that he wasn't getting the kind of care he wanted?
All the time.
But it was too late. Joseph Molioli died on April 9th, 2020, one of 83 residents to lose their lives at the nursing home from COVID. Molioli fears his father was put in the tiny, overflowing morgue.
My dad had to be one of those people. So I was beside myself thinking, how could a place even be open?
A federal inspection later discovered that residents with suspected COVID were put in rooms with residents who had no symptoms, and the staff were not keeping adequate temperature logs. The nursing home owners say the issues raised in the inspection were resolved, and they say, in part, the COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges, and our heroic staff faced those challenges as best they could. Andover Subacute was never shut down. It had to pay $220,000 in fines and temporarily stop admitting new patients. But after a couple of good inspections, a name change, and a new sign, the same owners were back in business. The owners renamed the facility Woodland Behavioral. They also own 6 other nursing homes. One of the owners was a previous executive for Skyline Healthcare, a chain that had 100 facilities, but collapsed amidst accusations of neglect and financial mismanagement, which the owners denied. NBC News investigated the company in 2019. At one nursing home, inspectors discovered maggots on this resident's catheter.
The individuals that ran Skyline should not be ever in charge of a nursing home again, and yet here we are.
David Grabowski is a professor of healthcare policy at Harvard. He says the pandemic exposed an industry already in crisis with a lack of resources and lack of regulation.
Different names, same practices. It's really frustrating. It's not enough. And this is why we need accountability. This is why we need that oversight.
Nikolai was fired from his job at the nursing facility 4 months after the incident, accused of improperly disposing medical waste. He says they were looking for an excuse to get rid of him after what he saw, an experience that continues to haunt him over a year later.
You're having trouble sleeping?
Unexplainable nightmares, something I'll have to live with for the rest of my life.
The Attorney General of New Jersey is conducting an investigation into this nursing home. They would not comment on its status, but we spoke to a number of families who are frustrated by the pace of that investigation, and the former employee we spoke with says no one has contacted him yet to tell his story. Tom?
Stephanie, thank you. And when we come back, we switch gears. The strangers who turned into a family all over a wrong text, getting back together again, what they told us about their now viral journey to the Thanksgiving table. And we're back now with a heartwarming story. 5 Thanksgivings in the making. What started out as a text to a wrong number has turned into a Thanksgiving tradition, turning 2 strangers into family. Savannah Guthrie has this story.
This brings me such immense joy. Still the best tradition ever. We all need more of this. These are just a few of the comments on the post of a story going viral again. It all started 5 years ago. Wanda Dench thought she was texting her grandson.
Thanksgiving dinner is at my house on November 24th at 3 p.m.
The text accidentally went to Jamal Hinton instead.
Who is this?
A selfie swap to confirm the mistaken identity.
You're not my grandma. Can I still get a plate, though?
Followed by a sincere invitation.
Of course you can. That's what grandmas do. We feed everyone.
Wanda was true to her word. She and her husband Lonnie welcomed Jamal with open arms into their home, serving up a new holiday tradition as they've spent every Thanksgiving together since. In 2019, the pair sat down with Today, reflecting on their story going viral.
And you got a lot of text messages.
I had 600 text messages that night, and it was crazy.
Last year, Lonnie passed away from COVID-19. Jamal and his girlfriend Michaela didn't hesitate to lend a helping hand to Wanda.
Oh, yes, I love you guys. We love you too.
Lonnie will be with them this Thanksgiving in spirit as Jamal confirms they are all set for year 6.
Gosh, for me, it's been such a journey. It's been awesome.
I mean, things I never expected. I remember the first year when I was reading some of those messages, and people were saying how we changed their lives, that they had faith in humanity again. And I was just so blown away by all those comments. Now, 5 years later, I realize, oh my gosh, they're the ones who changed my life. It's just, it's been awesome. What an awesome journey. I never would have expected this.
A great story as we head into the holidays. We thank Savannah for that, and we thank you for watching Top Story tonight. I'm Tom Llamas in Kenosha. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.